Hello, Facebook. Greetings, wizards and muggles alike, and welcome to our very first episode as the Wizard Factory, officially. And it feels oh so good. Brian Easterday, welcome, my
Yes,
brother.
thank you, sir.
And we've got a really good talk for you guys tonight, entitled Bullies on the Playground, Transmuting Darkness and Reclaiming Our Sovereignty. So this is a topic Brian and I have been sort of working at and developing for quite a few weeks now. And I guess we can start by setting the stage. So the title here, Bullies on the Playground. Well, where are we? First, you have to know where you are before you can, put characters on the stage. And the location is the playground. And what does that really mean? Playground. The word is right there. This place is not a prison. It's a playground. We're here to play. And from the context of, a parent, not that I'm a parent, but, looking at a child, when they're playing, what they're actually doing is learning. It's the freedom. Brian knows. Brian is a parent. And
Yes,
he's got a little guy, and he's just the cutest thing. When they're playing, they're learning, and what that means is they have total freedom, keyword, freedom, to trial and error. They're like banging things around, making noise. They like to build stuff and then knock it down. They're learning, they're growing, they're experimenting. And they don't have the programming yet of that fear of making mistakes and failing and all that kind of stuff that we get indoctrinated with later on. So essentially, we're all here at school, and we're on the playground, which is the ultimate classroom, right? We're here to play, we're here to learn and grow. But we have a bit of a problem. We have bullies on the playground. And what happens when you have bullies on the playground? Well, it's not fun anymore. And there's a atmosphere of fear in the air. And when there's fear present, what happens? You shut down. You don't want to play. You don't feel safe. You don't feel creative. It totally kills the right brain, the sacred feminine, right? Just you go into left brain survival mode, because that's what that's there for. That's the ego. It's here to say, I'm not safe. There's a threat. I need to, go into survival mode, basically. So, Brian, I guess I'll let you, jump in here and maybe talk a little bit about the bully aspect now that I've set the stage of where we are on the playground.
Absolutely. So, first off, let's introduce, who the bullies are that we're speaking about. And that's going to be the people that are running the control system. Whether this, be playing out in government, but when we're really referring to it, we're referring to the dark occultist and how they use mind control, dark sorcery to control and manipulate humanity in order to achieve their goals. And, once we can recognize this, there's a few things I think we can do. And we can really start to kind of break down the psychology of a bully. And we can look at first, let's look at first where the bully is coming from. And we can understand that they're really coming from a place of not really having a power of their own, just like a bully on a schoolyard, in the schoolyard on the playground. A lot of times they're coming from a place of fear and wounding and things like that. And the reason they've become a bully is because they're trying to overcompensate for that lack of power that they feel within. so when we can look at that, they really actually have a disempowered foundation that they're working off of. That can allow us to really look and see how powerful we really are. Because just like on the playground, that bully may pick on a person, one person at a time, and then people, may feel powerless. But when we realize we can all work together, that immediately gets rid of that bully's power. And that takes it back to the principle of mentalism, that it's all in the mind. The bully doesn't really have any power when they're actually trying to dominate other people like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's coming from that lack of power.
Mm-hmm.
And remembering that, we're really powerful, and especially when we can join together and kick the bullies off the playground, because just because there's some asshole on the playground doesn't mean the playground is not meant to be played on, to have fun. So just because there's someone there, we still need to remember that's an event or something happening on the playground. That's not representing what the playground itself is designed for. So
Right.
I think I'll let you riff on that from there.
Right. Yeah, I love that you touched on, what makes the bully and different from the other kids is that they're coming from a disempowered mindset, and they're in a state of perceived scarcity. So because they feel and recognize a lack of power from within themselves, they have to even, the playing field in their perception by taking power, from other people, disempowering them instead of coming up to the empowered level, they're trying to bring people down to their level by using fear, exactly, to shut all that stuff down. And this is exactly why the matrix system that we live in is so very focused on diminishing and stifling and suppressing the sacred feminine, because it's that playfulness, it's that creativity, it's the human spirit, and ultimately it's the energy of freedom, right? It's like, think of the water as the feminine and the cup as the masculine. Without that cup, it's formless and infinite. The cup is what puts boundaries on it. So the masculine, without the feminine component of care and empathy, seeks to put boundaries on things without care or regard for that feminine, and instead of a cup, it becomes, a safe or a prison cell. It's essentially, and if you just look at the way, our civilization is built, it's all cubes, which is a masculine occult symbol that represents the masculine. The line, the square, and the cube are all the masculine representations, and you have prison cells, you have work in a cubicle, city blocks, fall in line, everybody fall in line, uh, don't be a square, man, like all these little, it's all there, all through our, but it's in our subconscious mind. Most people aren't really aware of the very deep meaning behind these concepts and everything. So, and then when you think about the ultimate system, the hierarchical pyramid of, Illuminati or whatever, what do you build a pyramid out of? Cubes. You have to mold people into uniform units to stack them together, and so that they fall in line, literally. If everyone is embracing their individuality, their own human spirit and uniqueness, you can't build a pyramid out of that. It would be all, discombobulated and holes everywhere and everything like that. And ultimately, that's good for us and bad for them. So, yeah, that's a pretty good little introduction into the dynamic that what we're playing with here. Brian, you had something to say?
Yes. I want to point out too that, on a playground, one of the ways we can see how bullies tell you, you're worthless or whatever. Hold on, I think my internet might be going for a second. Hold on.
You're good now, I think.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
yeah, so bullies will always be trying to tell you a story about who you are and
Mhm.
what you are. And that's a narrative or a story someone else is telling you. And I think it's really empowering to remember that it's not their fucking story, it's yours. And
Exactly.
if you want to play on the playground, you should be free to do so. And don't live in fear of those that are
Right.
trying to control you.
Right, because that reminds me of my quote that says, there's only two ways that words can cause you harm. That's one is that they're true and you lack the strength to accept them, or that they're untrue and you lack the strength to reject them. So ultimately, what
Mm,
that is you're so disempowered from that fear vibration that you're believing their story over yours, and you're stifling, that inner voice that knows that's bullshit. You know what I'm saying?
hmm.
And so that's the imposement, and that's what the system does all the time. It's not just the bullies, in the real world, that that voice that has been put in place of your individual human spirit is, society, religion, school, you know, the government, all these little voices that they install in your brain like a little computer virus, and you think that's you talking, but you shouldn't do that. They'll make fun of you or you'll never succeed or whatever, you know, that's all there for a very specific reason. And it's very important to, really connect with yourself so that you can distinguish the voices and the difference between you and what has been put in its place to try to confuse you. So,
Yeah.
and the important thing to remember, actually no, you know what, I'll come back to that towards the end when we're getting into like the reclaiming part. So yeah, let's see here. I guess we can go ahead and move forward into the transmuting the darkness.
Okay. Okay. Um, yeah. You want me to start on that one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So, I think there's a lot of ways we can look at how to do this. Um, and transmuting a negative situation or a situation that's undesirable, there's a lot of tools we can use. I think a really useful one that everybody can tap into and benefit from is laughter.
Mm.
And this isn't a
Mhm.
kind of like a mockery in a hateful way or something that is like consuming you, but being able to use that bardic magic to really be able to like point out things or sometimes even exaggerate a point a little bit to be able so you can reflect back and see it in a more unique way. I think that's a very powerful tool for being able to do that.
Mhm. Right. That exaggeration point is, you know, yeah, that's a really good observation because it's like we all have like varying degrees of different aspects to our psychology, our, consciousness in general. And sometimes we might observe a little piece of ourselves in another. They're like a way exaggerated version of it. Somebody you think of as like this really big character, they might be really loudmouth or, lazy or whatever it is, and it's a good possibility that there's something, the reason that you have such a like a distaste for that person is because subconsciously you see a little bit of yourself in them, except they're just like this really amplified version of it, and it's a mirror to you because it's showing yourself back. It's almost like when you go to the carnival and the character, the cartoon guy like draws you, but if you have a slightly big nose, he gives you this really big nose, right? It's like amplifying everything so that you really have to look at all the little, it's like taking a magnifying glass to your whole being, and you can really take, see all the little details. Or like, I don't know, when TV went 4K and all the actors were like, you know they had to step up their skin game because you could see all the imperfections and stuff. I don't know.
No, I think that it's a very interesting concept to be able to look at that, because that's really how consciousness is working. We're
Mm,
all part of the mind of the all. We're all individuations of consciousness having an experience, so the all can reflect back different parts of its mind and grow and learn and discover itself. So I think that's a very interesting concept to hit on. And I think another way we can learn to transmute the shadow is something that you had mentioned, which was being an optimistic realist. So would you like to riff on that a little bit and introduce that concept?
yes, absolutely. This is one of those things where, like, to me, like, I feel like I have a real knack for finding the balance between seemingly opposing concepts, and and so much of what I see online with people arguing this or that, oftentimes they're two sides of the same coin that are at odds with each other, and basically it's like a magnet that got flipped around and they're sitting there like fighting each other. And then I just somehow have a very like natural ability to be able to take that and just flip it the way it goes to where they connect to each other the way they're meant to. So this idea of being an optimistic realist, or what did I say, a realistic optimist, either way works actually. um, Essentially what that means is it's important to see the world exactly as it is. So you don't have these rose-colored glasses where you're just kind of like filtering everything and only seeing the happy butterfly joy, you know, unicorn stuff. You're seeing things exactly as you are. You're informed upon the all the bad things that are going on, with the government, and the dark occult and pedophilia. And I mean, there's you could spend your whole life just researching that stuff and never even scratch the surface, right? And it's very important, I think, to be informed on these things and to understand not only how the world is as it really is, but of course that also connects to knowing the enemy, understanding how they operate, so that you're on an even playing field there. But that doesn't mean that you have to live in that world entirely. And ultimately we need to accept things as they are, because literally to do anything other than that is madness, because it already is that way, right? But that doesn't mean that you have to like everything. It doesn't mean that you don't take action to actually create the world that you want, and create more prosperity for yourself and for other people. It's just this balancing act of accepting things as they are, but also always seeing what is the potential, what are the possibilities of our shared co-created experience here on planet Earth. So it's a very difficult thing for some people, myself included, at times. It depends on what's going on and what I'm trying to process at the time. But yeah, I think people get really polarized to one side or the other, where they're just like, well, I know there's bad things in the world, but if I focus on it, it feeds it or something. And that's just not the way reality works. And that's a very disempowered, fear-based, um, burying your head in the sand kind of approach that I don't think is good. But at the same time, you know, we can look at things as they are, but realize that we have a tremendous power within each one of us as creators, as little g gods, and a lot of ability, to create heaven on earth, as we all say that we want, or pretend that we want.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, that you know that we can look at a way. I think a good metaphor to look at that is like with surfing. You know, you don't a surfer doesn't try to fight the wave. You have to go with it.
Oh,
So looking at the world in a realistic fashion, you can't look at that wave and decide that, oh, that's not the wave I want, and then change it. No, you just got to ride it the way it is.
mm,
You know,
yeah, that's
and
great.
and I think that's a really useful way to look at it. And I think something else that we can remember here is learning to honor the process and the cycle. the understanding nothing is just an instantaneous fix. There's always a constant evolution, a constant cycle, a constant process happening, and learning to honor that process and recognize that just because something is at this state right now doesn't mean it always has to be that way. I think that's a really healthy way to embody that concept.
Right. And I have seen quite a few people, you know, just in my interactions on Facebook and such, who are so defeated, and they just act, you know, and they have this almost passive aggressive tone towards me, who's, you know, speaking about being proactive and creating change. And they, you know, they kind of like almost sort of attack me by saying, you know, like, what makes you think you can do anything? Like, you know, the government's so big and so powerful. Oh, you're going to fight the military with your little, you know, Glock pistol or whatever, you know, that kind of thing. Um, it's just such a very defeated and disempowered mindset once again. You know, it, it's not that that's, you know, even that may be literally true what they're saying, but that's not a useful way to look at things as well. And remembering that we're individual parts of a bigger system. So by you're actually can, you know, I would say that you can do the most simply by living the truth and being as an example to other people, to model that to them, instead of, you know, shaking them and trying to force feed them, you know, it's for your own good. You know, ultimately I think that that's more of an ego thing, when you can't let it go, when you can't just let people, you know, just be where they are essentially on their journey, and realize that people aren't going to see things until they're damn good and ready, and you can show them the way and you can extend your hand, and I do encourage that, but you can't be attached to the outcome, because then it becomes an ego thing of, you know, feeling like they're not seeing it your way, or, you know, you know,
Yeah, I
the
think
sheep
there's a
kind of thing.
yeah, a couple good things there that I'd like to hit on. One is that the idea that we, you know, you gave the example of, oh, you can't, you know, you can't fight the whole government with your little pistol. I think that's, you know, about a half truth. And because remember everything, you know, let's take it back to the trivium process. Everything's built on a foundation or a filter. Well, that's built on the foundational assumption that this physical reality field is the only way to create change. It's coming from a person that doesn't really understand that they are magic,
Mm.
and that the magic they're capable of, when you can step into the ritual circle, when you can really start performing real magic and start operating from the plane of causality,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot that you can affect and you can do. Yeah,
Right.
in the physical reality field, there may not, you know, there may be some things to do, but let's take it back to like a military tactic, you know. You don't fight a battle you can't win, you know, so looking at the proper strategy. So if you're realizing that, yes, this, say, you know, just as an example, a combat confrontation with order followers, obviously that's probably not going to turn out well. But when you can step into it and start operating on the magical field, and really start performing things and putting effect out into the universe, that will get reflected back. And when you do that, not only is it more powerful an effect that you're putting out there, but they can't fuck with you as much.
Mm-hmm. Because you're zooming back. What I'm seeing here is that you're pulling back and you're able to see the big picture, which, you know, to me relates to the web of weird. You're seeing how all the pieces
Mhm.
fit together. The web of weird is a certain concept that we're going to get more in depth with. So, you know, don't worry if that, you know, if you're not sure what that means. But essentially, it's how reality is created, and you could, if for those familiar with the trivium, it's that as well. So you, for having a true deep understanding of how the universe works, how our reality is created, and our relationship to the, you know, subjective experience and our behaviors and actions and choices, um, that's where that's like the first step to stepping into your actual magic. Because yeah, I mean, that defeated mindset that I was just talking about, essentially what that is it's a fear of responsibility. I think that's what that
Mhm.
comes down to. They'd rather project their helplessness onto you then accept what you're saying, because if they accept what you're saying, they would also have to accept that they are then responsible for their part that they're playing on the world stage, and this little, play that we're all in. And that's a big thing for a lot of people. They don't want that responsibility. That's why things like the government exist. Oh, well, I just vote and people take care of all the difficult situations and make all the hard decisions for me. And I just, float along through life carefree because I got my Netflix and my hamburgers.
And I think, another really disempowered mindset that we can even see play out, in the truth community, alternative community, is the idea that this is a prison planet, and that's what this is like meant to be. And, this is why we've really come up with this whole theme of looking at it like a playground. Like, just because there's a bunch of assholes being bullies on the playground doesn't mean it's not a place to have fun. Because that's reality. You're here to learn, you're here to grow. But as you talked about earlier with a young child, you can really observe how much kids learn and enjoy and experience things. And, a little personal example that, my son taught me this last year was on 4th of July. As being an anarchist for many years, I was kind of like, oh, I don't want to celebrate that status holiday, kind of being kind of a dick about it. Honestly, I wasn't having a very good perspective, but watching him, just get joy out of looking at the fireworks, he wasn't, in his mind, he was just enjoying that in the moment. He wasn't thinking, oh,
he doesn't know anything about all that.
Doesn't know anything about that. He was just enjoying it. It was just a pure experience. And I got so much joy just from watching the smile on his face. And that was a really big lesson for me to like step back and be like, okay, it's okay to enjoy things. It's okay to enjoy this physical reality field, because we're souls. We came here to have fun and to learn and to grow. That does not mean we're not meant to experience challenges, because learning through the apophatic process is very useful. Sometimes you do need to burn your hand on the stove to learn that it's fucking hot. But that doesn't mean that's the only process that's there, because I think learning to laugh at things and have fun and learn through that positive experience as well is just as powerful.
Right. Because ultimately it all comes down to a choice. Are you going to choose to pick out all the shit that you want to be mad about and oh, that's so stupid, and look at all the, sheeple have, whatever, or you can just flip that switch and choose to enjoy that experience. When you were saying that, it also reminded me of all the people that kind of, said, when I woke up, I just can't even watch movies or like Netflix anymore, because it's all just a bunch of brainwashing. And, and yeah, like, that's true. But first of all, if you study the symbolism and know the psychology, it doesn't really work on you anymore, because you can see it and you're conscious of it. And two, it doesn't mean, it's just literature is really all it is. And I think that, if literature and storytelling isn't your thing, that's fine. But honestly, if that's your only reason, just because of, it's them and they and all that kind of stuff, like, really, there's so much. I get a lot of enjoyment out of kind of analyzing and picking out the allegory and what are the deeper esoteric stories.
Learning experience.
Yeah, right. It's like Aesop's fables, but for adults. I mean, it's all essentially there. Like, there are the moral of the story is like built in there. And especially with movies like Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, there's so much truth in there. And who cares if it came out of Hollywood? Like, I can ignore the bad and choose to glean the value out of it as well.
Well, we can see how this plays out too, and I myself was, guilty of this when I, first started, coming onto a lot of this information, that I kind of took that similar stance, and you cut so much potential joy out of your life.
Exactly.
You're always looking at everything that, everything's evil, everything's horrible, the whole world's just fucked.
It's like you're literally robbing yourself. You're literally just robbing
yourself of all your joy. And like I said, just like that surfer, if he was, pissed off because he couldn't, change the wave and get the exact wave he wanted, well, he'd never fucking go out and catch any wave at all.
Mm-hmm.
You got to go out there and get on it.
Or he's
Have fun
scared
no
of
matter what it's
sharks
like.
because the
Yeah.
sharks are the metaphorical bullies of the ocean, and he's
Well,
too
and
scared
I
to
mean,
play.
right. And we can think about it, you know, in a deeper way too, that, you know, if you're trying to, like, you know, fight a wave like that, you're just going to get crashed and smashed against the rocks, and you're going to get the wind knocked out of you and potentially drown, because you're fighting these huge forces rather than just learning how to use them. And I think we can tie this back to, as I was talking about with you the other day, the magical concept of being able to use a positive and negative polarity,
Right,
and that both of these are required for consciousness.
like a
Because just
battery.
like a battery, exactly, just like a battery, if you just have two positives, that it doesn't work. You have to have the different polarities in order to actually hold a charge in the battery.
Mm-hmm.
So you can, everything is energy. So you can use that energy, and having the different polarities of them actually makes your magic much more effective.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're only, you know, seeing everything as just this horrible crap that, you know, you can't handle, you're not really understanding how magic and sorcery actually work.
Mm.
And you're actually cutting yourself off from a lot of potential energy that's there. It's being given up, and you could totally harness it and use it for your magical workings.
Exactly. That's why I like my trolls. I am grateful that they want to give me their
Let them
energy.
feed you.
It's like, oh, I'll
Yeah,
take it. You know, give it
yeah,
to me. Yeah. And I'll transmute
mhm.
that shit.
Exactly. That's what it's all about, is being able to take, because we're swimming in an abundance of energy. So the fact that, you know, anybody of, you know, any of us are feeling very disempowered in, you know, say the truth or
It's all
the
about a belief because you're not tapping into the
exactly,
infinite power that's literally all around. The only limitation is this right there. And
exactly,
that's
taking it
BMS.
back to the principle mentalism.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Um, yeah, let's see. What's our next little talk? So, oh yeah, so back to, you know, on the idea of completing the circuit of using, you know, both the positive and negative charge, we can see how that plays out both in the microcosm and the macrocosm.
Mm-hmm.
So in the microcosm, we can see that, you know, inside ourselves, not only are we human beings that are capable of compassion and empathy and love and laughter and all these beautiful things, but
Right.
each of us also have the ability to be capable. You know, we all have a shadow. We all have that capability to commit evil, to do dark.
Right.
And on the macrocosmic level, that's how consciousness is too. All these have to exist. Both charges have to be there in order for the charge of consciousness, for all this energy to be there to be able to use, because consciousness is it's a battery of energy, and it's through this that we're learning about ourselves in the mind of the all.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, like as you know, these bullies, they can come in any form. You know, obviously you can think about the government and, you know, the bankers or whatever, but you know, they appear on the small scale as well in
Mhm.
the you know, individual form. But ultimately, their psychology is the same, and the way to deal with them is very similar as well. And you know, it comes back to having healthy boundaries and a healthy mindset.
Mhm.
And if you're constantly stuck in a victim mentality, you're never going to go anywhere because you're giving them that power. By being the victim, you're giving them the power of the oppressor, of the abuser. Um, Now, it's important to acknowledge that dynamic at first when we're healing, because if you're not, you're still in the denial stage. But that's why if you look at the 5 stages of grief, you know, it goes through all of them, and you can't stay stuck on denial, anger. You know, those are part of it. But if you're not moving past that onto the you know, the final one is acceptance. That's why I was saying, you know, be a positive realist. You have to accept things as they are and then move the fuck on. That's how you get out of that victim mindset.
And I think one thing that we can observe here is that sometimes we are our own bullies.
Yes.
that we're the ones keeping ourselves disempowered, that we're the
Right.
ones telling ourselves, oh, you can't do this, you're going to fail, what are these people going to think of you? Because at
Right.
that point, no one else is actually doing anything to you. It's all in the mind.
Right. It
What good
started
fear?
with them. You inherited those mindsets from them because they programmed you through trauma, and then essentially they can be long gone and you're still sitting there doing what they did to you to yourself. And then,
Hmm.
and that's the insanity of it too, is because you're that whole time you're still blaming them, and you're not even seeing that it's you and that you could flip that switch at any time and take your power back.
Exactly, exactly. And that's, I think, the thing that, we're really afraid of most. It is, we're so powerful that we actually trick ourselves into thinking we're powerless, and we're afraid of our own
which is
success.
which is only possible because we're so
So
powerful.
powerful. Exactly. And that's the beautiful, that's kind of
Oh,
like
that's
the beautiful
good, dude.
irony
That's
of
hilarious.
it,
Love that. So let's get back to a little bit about back into the transmuting the shadow, right? So
Yeah.
where do we go from there? Because the system exists, and it is a system of fear and coercion, and operates by trauma-based mind control. So how what's the one obvious only way out of trauma-based mind control is healing, healing
Hmm.
that trauma. And so you've and that pain and that suffering manifests itself as shadow inside of us, and it's within, right? So you can't just keep pointing the fingers forever and ignoring that shadow that's growing. It's like a monster that it's like under your basement or whatever. The only way to deal with that issue is to go down there in the basement with the big flashlight and just look at what you're dealing with, and allow it to be what it is, essentially, because this is a natural experience. There's a reason we're all wired very similar, right? And all the things that happen through trauma are actually there to protect us, believe it or not. It's just that they're a short-term solution to an imminent threat. But once that threat is gone, so obviously the first natural thing is to remove yourself from the situation where the threat is present, and then you have to work with that energy that's there, because it's not going to go anywhere. So no matter how much you're running from it and numbing and distracting and using your emotional crutches, until you do that one and only thing that's going to handle that problem, it's never going to go away. So again, it's absolute madness, right? It like it's like Larkin said in his recent talk about, like, you know, uh, the way to fix your broken foot is to light your hair on fire. It just makes absolutely no sense, right?
Hmm.
It's insanity. So, sitting with our feelings, you know,
Hmm.
uh, not, and I learned this in my ayahuasca, not resisting it, but also not forcing it, just letting it go, just letting it be, let it flow through you. Because what is the emotions? It's the waters. It's what does energy do? It flows. So it has to just be able to move as it already does. Trying to do anything with it other than just let it be is like trying to make your heart beat, right? It's the universe is more intelligent than you. So you're trying to do everything with the intellect and the ego, right? That's the neuroses that we're so conditioned for. So ultimately, just sit with them, let them be. Don't distract. Don't reach for your phone. Don't stuff your face with cheesecake or whatever. Um, just be. Go for a walk, meditate. Clean. That's a really good one for me, because it gives your brain just enough to do to keep it busy and shut up, but you're not like escaping. Like, you still have your thoughts and you still have your feelings, and there's a lot of quiet, empty space for all that to breathe and be processed and then released, because that's really what it comes down to, is you have to process your emotions and then let them go.
Yep, I think one of the most useful tools that I found in my practice and with clients and students is that qigong or other
Mhm.
types of energy work
Energy work.
like the whole breath that I teach on my channel. So learning to cast your circle, the magi. If you don't know how to do that, go to my YouTube channel, Mastering Midgard, and check that out. That's something you should do every day. Learn how to empower your circle. Learn how to do the whole breath or
Mm.
other types of qigong. That's really going to help empower your energy body, and especially that whole breath. You're learning to actually let life force energy flow through yourself. So you're bringing the energy in from Father Sky and letting it flow through you down into Mother Earth. And you are the beautiful conduit that is in between. When you can experience that flow of energy, you can become so empowered because you're not trying to control and build up. You realize that you don't have to hold all this power in order to be powerful, because you realize it's already all around you. And as long as you know how to tap into it, there's an infinite amount of resource there for you at the drop of a dime.
Mm.
Anytime you know how to tap into it, it's right there and it's instantly accessible. And I think
Absolutely.
another way to really process trauma, to look at our subconscious mind and feel things out, are the arts of gnosis. Uh, Vedic astrology obviously is a great place to start to learn a lot of your different characteristics and the variables and kind of, how you operate with the world around you, both internally and with the world around you.
Mm.
But then I think a really useful one for processing trauma and things are the 9 world rune readings, because
Right.
what they, as we've talked about before, each of the 9 worlds on the Yggdrasil on the Helm of Ah here, they represent a different internal aspect of ourself, and they actually correlate to a different chakra.
Hmm.
So whenever I put down a 9 rune spread, I can actually specifically analyze. It's like taking an energetic a snapshot of the web of weird, of what's currently at play in the web of weird for you.
Mm.
So what you're weaving in reality, both internally and externally, and then I can look and see exactly where those blocks are, and then prescribe ritual and remedies specifically based on your energetic needs. Because we have to realize, like with the intellect and logical mind, you're not going to think your way out of trauma. Those are things that have to be felt with, and you need to tap into the
Right.
subconscious and unconscious, because these are where this trauma is stored. And ritual is how
In
you
the body
access.
as well.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what these ritual, they will bring this up from out of your body. You'll, a lot of times when you're doing energy work, all of a sudden you'll notice, like, a certain part of your body's feeling stiff or something like that, and you'll feel the urge to stop. Whenever you do that, do it more, because there's something there. There's a resistance that you're hitting, and once you
Hmm.
break through that, you realize, and that's the purpose of the ritual and stuff, is that it's supposed to bring these things up because they've been suppressed, and it brings it up to the surface of the conscious mind, so you can then experience it and process it, because you didn't get the chance to do that before. It got pushed down, so it needs to be brought up so you can look at it. And this is a process, and it's very, very important to do. This is why our ancestors spent so much time in ritual. It's very, very powerful. Can't stress that enough.
Hmm. And I can attest to that simply, in my very recent experience, because when I first met you, I was really not stepping into the practice. I was very much more in my head into the knowledge and the intellectual uh, aspect of it, but I hadn't really begun to do much in by way of putting that into action. And so, I can definitely thank you for, in over time encouraging me and just keep kind of putting that bug in my ear to, like, you need to start working in ritual, start practicing. And I'm already, like, blown away with what I'm experiencing through that. So, and what's really cool about the arts of gnosis that you mentioned, you've got the astrology, which is looking back to when you first came into this world. So you're getting a foundational knowledge of yourself, and anyone who hasn't done that ever, or perhaps you've only had the Western, astrology looked at, and not the Vedic side, because it's a much deeper, much more nuanced and broader scope of a science there. And that's something you should do at least once and keep notes on so that you can refer back to it as a reminder of all those things. Because, again, if we're looking at processing trauma and stuff, everyone has a different way of approaching that based on your signs and all the different energies that are at play. Some people are a lot more open with their feelings. A lot of people, some people are a lot more like closed off and stuff, or the crab has his shell and all that kind of stuff. So looking at that can give you some insight into how you personally need to approach your own healing and how you deal with your emotions and all that other stuff. And then with the rune reading, though, is kind of like giving you a little telescope that you can look into the past, you can look at the present, you can look into the future, not in a prophetic way or a fortune telling like this is going to happen. It's all about unlocking the parts of your own psyche and how you can move forward. If you're looking at the future, it's not so much like this is going to happen and this is going to happen, as much as it is be mindful of this when you're looking at this situation, or watch out for this, or but this is good and this is in alignment. And same with how you're looking. It's about your relationship to the past, present, and future. It's not about what it is or what it's going to be. It's about how you can perceive it and have a more useful perspective on what is, will, and has been occurring, in order to level up, because that's what this experience is all about. That's what we're here to do. So,
Absolutely.
what a great way for us, as practitioners, and also who offer these. I currently am not able to do the Vedic, but I can do the runes. Brian does the astrology readings and the runes, and so you have those two tools at your disposal if you wish. If you're feeling like what we're saying about this is something that you could benefit from. Again, Brian and I do rune readings regularly for ourselves, so it's somebody, it's always good to do.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'd like to hit on something here too, is
yeah.
that I think the arts of gnosis are extremely valuable for being a midwife of consciousness to ourself and also to others. And a great way I can see this out is, for example, when I can cast someone's birth chart, I can look at their specific energetic needs and how they're operating. So the way I explain something to one person may not be the best way to explain it to another. And this is something I see very much lacking in the truth community, where we take this one size all fits approach that, oh, if you don't understand this truth and you don't get this, or, oh, I don't care how you feel about it, or all this. You're not taking into account the fact that every single person operates differently.
Right. That approach, that hammer with the truth approach, it's good sometimes, but it's not a one size fits all.
Exactly.
Administer of the medicine.
Exactly, because we're all unique individuations of consciousness. We all have a special way to reflect back, and it's okay to honor yourself. And if a certain person comes to an understanding through a different path, it doesn't matter. It's like if you have one destination and there's a lot of different routes you can take to get there. Just because they didn't travel the same fucking highway as you doesn't mean they're not going to get there. Just
Right.
because they didn't show up at the same time as you doesn't mean they're not going to get there. And stop trying to fucking force them to be there right when you are, because you want to. That's your own narcissism.
Exactly. My mantra for that I've, especially recently, that's been coming up more for me intuitively. All roads lead home. So no matter where you are, what route you choose to take, because of natural law and the apophatic learning system, doesn't matter what road you take, because if you take the wrong road, you're going to figure that out and counter steer and correct and try to get back on track. So ultimately, whichever route you're going, you might take the scenic route and get there behind somebody else who's got a really good navigational system. They're going to get there a lot more efficiently, but ultimately, what's the rush, right? If you die, you're just going to come back anyway. So
yeah, well, and it's a playground. Have fun on the trip.
Yeah. Who says you can't take the scenic route? And if you, obviously your soul is guiding, taking the wheel, it's going to give you the experience that you need, and that it's going to give you the most experience points to take it back.
Absolutely. And I think a great example of how this, played out in my own life was, as many of you may know, I enlisted in the Marine Corps, right, like actually, got out of regular high school and paid to go to my own private school so I could graduate early just to go to basic training faster. I was very gung-ho, very much under very deep mind control. But that experience and going through that taught me extremely valuable lessons. And
Mm,
even though I may not have been on the most direct path at that time, that path that I traveled was still really important in my learning process. Um,
mm,
so, recognizing that apophatic learning, if we can look back, at all our lives, and this is something I'm sure we can all relate to, you know, there's great experiences that I'm sure we learned a lot from, but some of our most valuable lessons come from traveling the path that maybe we shouldn't have traveled because we learned that, like, hey, that's not the right one. And that's okay. And that takes time to play out because, as we said earlier, it's not this instant light switch. Honoring that process, understanding everything is a cycle is so important. Just like, taking it back to being a midwife of consciousness, the child isn't instantly created and born. It's a process of growth.
mm.
And then even
Is
when
the
they're
core-
born, they
yes,
have to continue to grow and to learn. You don't come out just knowing everything. Not one of us did that, you
right.
know.
We all came out into this world crapping in our diapers and, drooling on ourselves. Like, get over yourself, right? Just like we're all here to learn, and nobody has all the
Exactly.
answers. So,
Yeah. Stop bullying each other.
and yourself. Nice, dude. Well, man, do you have anything you want to add?
Let's see. No, I think that's a good little wrap up. And so people know that we're going to be doing these podcasts regularly. I think we're going to try to do them about once a week,
One a week, I think.
yep, and generally try to make it around the same day and time if at all possible. Obviously, we have to we work around your schedule as a truck driver sometimes, so people know. Sometimes it'll probably be a little bit later in the evening. A lot of times that we may be on, but we will be on every week, absolutely.
Right.
And the next talk we have coming out, we have a very special guest that will be joining us that we're very, very excited to be co-creating with. He's a brother that we both have deep respect for and is an amazing magi and manifester in his own right. And that is Kevin Orrs.
Yes.
And
We'll
very
actually,
excited to be bringing him on for the talk.
right, because we've actually got some other projects in the future, much larger than
Yes.
a podcast that we're going to be cooperating with him on, that we're very honored and excited to be doing. So that's going
Tune
to
in
be,
next week.
needless to say, absolutely. But yeah, I guess that's gonna wrap this one up for this evening.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you for tuning in, guys. We appreciate it. If anybody has questions, you're interested in the services, please
Right.
feel free to send either Logan and I a message. And if you have any questions, whatever that may be, and we'll be more than happy to answer and respond to all those.
Right. And of course, we're always open to your questions, your comments. Please share the video. Let us know what you think. Give us your honest feedback, because we always want to make sure that we're trying to serve our people, because that's what we're here for ultimately. So, yeah, thanks again for watching. It's been a really fun and I think informative little chat, Brian. Thank you, and I hope
Absolutely.
everyone has a peaceful evening. And we'll see you next time on the Wizard Factory.